Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Fluently Forward. And today we are going to be breaking down the latest on all of the new Epstein files that have been released, over 200,000 of them. Although I've dug through not every corner, but a lot of corners of them. And some are just like full books and news articles that have been re uploaded or transcripts of files that we've already seen. But there are a lot of new pieces of evidence, a lot of them being email correspondence between Jeffrey Epstein and multiple other people. And we're going to dive all into it today and then see what this kind of reveals with the Epstein case and what's going to happen next. So I had planned a Yellow Jackets episode for today with two really fun guests, but people were asking for Epstein, especially the lovely Lindsay from We Met at Acme. So even though all of the research I've done on this, by the time you listen, I've only done it in the past 24 hours, I think that there's still a lot to be uncovered here. And then we'll just do Yellow Jackets on December 1st. So we can look forward to that. Here is the latest. If you quite literally haven't heard anything, we're going to go over the latest emails and news that have been released, all of these different names of people who are associated with Epstein, as in they've been email communicating with him for years and years. And now some of them come out and they go, I deeply regret my correspondence that I had with the disgraced financier, Jeffrey Epstein. That's what they all call him. It's like the word pedophile is right there. He's dead. It's not like you're going to offend him. Anyway, then what I want to talk about, obviously, are the rumors that in this email, there are references to Trump blowing Bubba, which could be Bill Clinton, and there allegedly being photos of it. I had to look into this. I really cannot believe that the words are coming out of my mouth, but it is, as time of recording, November 16th at 6:24 p.m. And this is something that is happening, and we're going to talk about it. And then at the end, I'm going to talk a little bit more about what this means about all of the Epstein conspiracies in general. Do we now need to take a look at how he died in his jail cell? Who ordered someone to kill him? Did he even die at all? Is he alive, having a pina colada right now? So for anyone who hasn't looked into any of this at all, here is the latest. This past Wednesday, nearly a week ago, the Democrats that were on the House Oversight Committee released 3 new emails from the estate of Jeffrey Epstein. And these 3 emails were the initial ones that got kicked off and put onto the internet. And they mention President Trump. So, obviously the Democrats are releasing, kind of cherry picking 3 emails that all reference Trump. And it raised some questions about their relationship. Trump has always been on record as saying, yeah, I used to be friends with Jeffrey Epstein, but then I kicked him out of Mar-a-Lago and I never spoke to him again. And he's such a creepy guy, even though he's also within the past couple of years said that Ghislaine Maxwell is like a woman who he wishes her well. And it always seemed like, why did Donald Trump kick Jeffrey Epstein out of his resort, Mar-a-Lago? Trump has said that Jeffrey Epstein was stealing employees from him. Now, one of the employees that seems to have been stolen from Mar-a-Lago was Virginia Giuffre, who is one of the most prominent victims of everything that happened with Jeffrey Epstein. And she was in fact recruited at Mar-a-Lago, where she was working at the pool, and Ghislaine saw Virginia at Mar-a-Lago and recruited her. So Donald Trump says, that's why I cut off ties with him, because he was stealing my employees and I didn't want to be friends with him anymore. But almost in the same way that the Katy Perry and Taylor Swift beef is about backup dancers, you kind of look at it and you're like, well, surely there's something else going on behind the surface here. It's not just that. And we find out a little bit more about that in the emails. So where we are at, just continuing with the timeline, is that later that same Wednesday, the Republicans on the House Oversight Committee released the latest set of more than 20,000 documents that have emails from Epstein talking about his displeasure with Trump, how much he doesn't like him, financial market reports, court documents, just this huge treasure trove of information. So the original first 3 emails that were cherry-picked and sent out to the public, we covered these on Patreon, but just a TLDR recap for anyone who is not on Patreon. One of the emails is an exchange from 2015 between Jeffrey Epstein and this guy named Michael Wolff. And Michael Wolff is a journalist, an author. He's written a lot of books about Trump's presidency and different political things. And he's a little bit of a controversial journalist. But we find out that for years, he has been emailing with Jeffrey Epstein. Here is the sneak peek we see of their first email in 2015. In the email between them, both of them are discussing a potential question that might come up in an upcoming CNN appearance with Trump. And the question might be about Trump and Epstein and their personal ties. So keep in mind, this would have been before the first time Trump took presidency in 2016. Here's what Michael says to Jeffrey. I think you should let him hang himself. If he says he hasn't been on the plane or to the House, that gives you a valuable PR and political currency. You can hang him in a way that potentially generates a positive benefit for you. Or, if it really looks like he could win, you could save him, generating a debt. Now, what's really interesting about this email to me is that number one, anytime I'm able to look at emails or texts that I'm not supposed to, I love it. It just fulfills like all of the nosy urges in me, even when Justin Baldoni and Blake Lively, like, ooh, some of those voice notes and messages really made you clench up, whether it was him, like, I don't know, doing like ASMR about how she was breastfeeding or her talking about how she has all of her dragons and stuff. It was just fun to see how people text each other because a lot of these folks, everything that we see from them is like a statement from my representative or a Vogue, what's in my bag, but everything that's in there happens to be all of these brands that I'm partnered with. But when you get to see how people really talk, it gives a lot of interesting insight. So, what we're able to find out here is number one, that Michael Wolff basically has some sort of like connection with CNN. He knows what questions Trump is going to get ahead of time. Secondly, he's working with Jeffrey Epstein on putting together a strategy of how they can play this, how they can do this. Very interesting. We're going to come back to this later. Another one of the three emails that we first got on Wednesday was in 2011. And this is an email that Epstein sent to Ghislaine Maxwell. We all know Ghislaine Maxwell, his henchwoman. And in it, he's basically saying that Trump is a dog that hasn't barked. He says, I want you to realize that the dog that hasn't barked is Trump. And then he goes on this email to say that Trump spent, quote, hours at my house with one of redacted victims. So you read in between the lines of this email, and Epstein is basically saying to Ghislaine Maxwell, Trump has spent hours at my house with, allegedly, Virginia Giuffre. That's what Caroline Levitt is saying. But Trump has spent hours at my house with one of my underage victims. And yet he's a dog that hasn't barked. And Ghislaine replies saying, I have been thinking about that. So some people look at this email and they go, Jeffrey Epstein is wondering who's going to rat him out. And maybe it's that Trump isn't ratting him out. Isn't that interesting? Now, some people, the conspiracy on top of the conspiracy, they look at that email and they go, wait a minute. We all know the theory. I talk about it all the time, that Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell were government assets, maybe for the CIA, maybe for Mossad, maybe for a little bit of both. Who knows what was going on? But what if they're wondering and pondering in this email exchange, what if Trump is also an informant? Because the way that they're emailing, the dog that hasn't barked, dog, you'll find out in other emails too. Jeffrey Epstein does not speak very well about Donald Trump, but he goes, the dog that hasn't barked is Trump. And she goes, yeah, I've been thinking about that. I don't know, just a different angle to look at it. We're going to continue. Then in 2019 with Jeffrey Epstein and the same guy, Michael Wolff. So as you remember, their last email was in 2015. And now in 2019, they're still emailing. So we have at least 4 years of email correspondence between them. He talks about how Trump basically knew what was going on with Epstein. One of the direct quotes is, of course, Trump knew about the girls as he asked Ghislaine to stop. And this is what Jeffrey Epstein says to the reporter, Michael Wolff. Trump knew about the girls. He asked Ghislaine to stop. Now, this could reference Trump saying to Ghislaine Maxwell, stop poaching people at the pool/massage area. Those are my employees. But what we also have is the extra layer on top of this is that he knew what Ghislaine was poaching her for. So I find that really interesting because a lot of people who are Trump defenders, they do this weird form of logic that we talked about over on Patreon where it's like, oh my God, Trump is such a good guy. He knew what was going on and he kicked Jeffrey Epstein right out of Mar-a-Lago. And then it's like, okay, well, if he knew what was going on and that's why he kicked them out of Mar-a-Lago, then why is he on record as like being friends with Jeffrey Epstein, still referring to Ghislaine Maxwell as someone who he wishes her well? Surely if you knew someone was a pedophile, you wouldn't wish them well, unless what they're doing doesn't bother you. So we also have more information here. In 2017, Jeffrey Epstein wrote to former Treasury Secretary Lawrence Summers. We're going to talk a lot about him. This is what Jeffrey Epstein said, quote, I have met some very bad people, none as bad as Trump, not one decent cell in his body. Now, what's interesting here, too, he also describes Trump as a maniac who shows signs of early dementia. So we're getting a lot of information in these emails about what Epstein thinks about Trump. But another point that I do want to consider, and I feel like it's not being talked about nearly enough in all of these news articles, is that yes, he's saying Trump is a bad person. And this is a pedophile with a sex trafficking ring of children. So, like, obviously, you guys know how I feel about Trump. But I just feel like a lot of people, because this information is new and it's exciting emails that we're pouring through, we're forgetting the fact that Jeffrey Epstein is also a liar. So I just want to kind of surface that more towards the top of this episode for a lot of these things that we read, because I do think it's important to keep in mind. So anyway, these emails came out, then more came out on Wednesday, and Caroline Leavitt, the White House press secretary, sent a statement to NPR, and she said that the reason these emails came out is because the Democrats have selectively leaked emails to the liberal media to create a fake narrative to smear President Trump. And that statement to me gives the same energy as like when you're on a snark subreddit and somebody's like, this influencer blocked me. And all I did was simply point out that her dress didn't flatter her in the best way. I was simply literally helping her out and she blocked me. And it's like, please, like, I can tell from what you're saying and how you're saying it that you are in the wrong here and you're the instigator because you just come across as so incredibly inauthentic. And it's just so funny that in this statement, right, the Democrats, even though later that day, the Republicans also made a lot of these files public, the Democrats selectively leaked emails to the liberal media to create a fake narrative. It's just insane, but like there's no use in me getting triggered by this because like we know that these people are stupid. We just live in a world now where everybody's able to bald face lie and get away with it. She continues by saying these stories are nothing more than bad faith efforts to distract from President Trump's historic accomplishments, and any American with common sense sees right through this hoax and clear distraction from the government opening back up again. Well, thankfully, I am not an American with common sense. I am an American who likes to hyperfixate on issues and has galaxy brain conspiracy level thinking on things. So join me, my fellow people without common sense, as we dive into all of these different documents. Let's start first with the section of all of the new names that are released in these documents. Who has been in correspondence with Epstein? We obviously hear about Donald Trump. We hear about Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, the former prince and brother of King Charles. Trump's former advisor, Steve Bannon, is in a lot of these, and just a lot of other people from media, politics, entertainment. We'll get into them with a little bit more depth. So, number one, I want to start off with Michael Wolff. And he's the guy that I mentioned earlier. He's the journalist slash author who was in email correspondence with Jeffrey Epstein for years. He's now 72. And he was in one of the first three emails that were released where he's saying, like, hey, CNN is probably going to ask Trump about this. What do you think that we should do? And what's really interesting is that in that original email, he's emailing Epstein and saying, CNN's going to ask him something. I think you should do this. Epstein replies to him at one point and he says, if we were able to craft an answer for him, meaning Trump, what do you think it should be? Then they both go on in the emails to discuss a strategy. This is where Michael Wolff says, I think you should let him hang himself. It could be good leverage for you down the road, et cetera, et cetera. Now, what I read in between the lines with these emails is, first of all, A, right, they have connections to someone at CNN, but then also B, they have connections to Trump or somebody on Trump's team. Because Epstein says, if we were able to craft an answer for him, what do you think it should be? The way they're talking about this so casually, I mean, there's a million different things you could read in between the lines. Trump has answers for him crafted all the time. Politicians in general, let's be honest, have answers crafted for them all the time. Epstein maybe has done this before, and that's why he's talking about it. Not even, do you think we could craft an answer for him? But if we were going to craft an answer for him, what should the answer be? Maybe he's done it before. Also, they have a way to get information to Trump. Who knows if the two guys are still friends at this point? More on that later in the episode. But they're very easily able to speak to people at the inner circle of CNN and speak to people at the inner circle of the Trump team. Then later, after more of the files were released, there's a separate email on October 2016, and this is a few days before the presidential election. And this is when Michael Wolff offers Jeffrey Epstein a chance to sit for an interview that could, quote, finish Trump. So all the way back, right before Trump became president the first time, people were talking in these emails about a chance for Epstein to go on the record or sit down for some type of interview that could finish or destroy Trump. And it seemed like that was enough of a possibility that multiple people were emailing about it. Now, what I don't understand, I mean, obviously it didn't end up happening, and why in the hell would it? That's like the one thing I can't get my mind around. If Epstein went out on record and he sat down for an interview and said, you know what, let's take the presidency away from Donald Trump because, man, this guy's a pedophile. He's been hanging out with me. Why in the hell would Jeffrey Epstein do that? Because this was back in 2016. And even though Jeffrey Epstein was convicted and found guilty in 2008 in Florida, as being a pedophile, he was flying kind of under the radar in 2016. They were like, let's let bygones be bygones. And until he was convicted in New York City in 2019, nobody was really paying that much attention to Jeffrey Epstein. Like most of the public didn't know what his name was back then. So I find it really odd that he would even be considering emails where he would be sitting down for an interview to air it all out and mess up Trump's chances of presidency. Now, obviously, it didn't happen, but I find it very curious that they would even talk about it like it would. The next person who is emailing Epstein a lot is this guy named Larry Summers. He was the former Democratic President Bill Clinton's Treasury Secretary. And then he also was at Harvard for a bit, which we're going to talk about. Larry Summers and different emails with Epstein were able to see that they had a really, I don't know if relationship is the right word. They had a friendship, I guess. I'm just going to say that they had like a really good relationship, which sounds so strange to say. But Larry Summers and Jeffrey Epstein in emails were able to see that the two of them would meet for dinner pretty frequently. He would try to connect Larry Summers to prominent global figures. At one point in July 2018, Jeffrey Epstein proposes a meeting with the president of the United Nations, who would be an interesting person for you. And it seems like this really is prominent in how Jeffrey Epstein would move. He was a total connector. He was always trying to matchmake and connect people with each other. And in the few times that I have been around people who are giga wealthy, like, in New York, the elevator door opens into their apartment, like, probably haven't had to worry about money for the past 15 years. They are so into that in a way that strikes me as like just really kind of slimy. But there's something about people who like really get, I don't know, like rich people get their rocks off by introducing one person to another and being like, I made that connection happen. We're going to talk more about the emails with Larry Summers and Jeffrey Epstein, but I do want to say that in 2023, a spokesperson for Larry Summers contacted the Wall Street Journal, and he said that Larry Summers deeply regrets being in contact with Epstein after his conviction. And I'm just wondering, like, we're going to read all of the emails. It's just not enough. It's great to hear a statement so then we can roll our eyes at it, but I just find it such bullshit. Like, this is not somebody, let's say Jeffrey Epstein comes up to you at a dinner party and you take a photo together. You didn't have time to Google him. You don't know who he is. If you're engaging in email correspondence for years and years and years, and as we're going to get to with Larry Summers and Jeffrey Epstein, they're sharing advice about what to do with girls, where to go on vacation, what they're going to get for dinner, different values that they both share, which we're about to talk about. You know who this person is, and you know that he was convicted as a pedophile. So guilty. One of the other scandalous things about Larry Summers is that he was the 27th president of Harvard University from 2001 to 2006, which would make him a really good pick for Jeffrey Epstein because we all know that Jeffrey Epstein, despite having not gone to Harvard, he was obsessed with Harvard. Like he's always wearing Harvard merch and all of these photos. And it just seems like another way that he would try to fuck with people and make himself appear more high status than he actually was. So I find it really interesting that Jeffrey Epstein was always obsessed with Harvard, and now he becomes friends with this guy who was the president of Harvard from 2001 to 2006. Now, Larry Summers ended up resigning from that position because there were a lot of scandalous things that happened around 2005 with him. There was this conflict with Cornell West. There was a financial conflict of interest. And then there was also this speech he gave in 2005, and he was theorizing on reasons why there's an underrepresentation of women in STEM. And he said that a possibility exists that there is a different availability of aptitude at the high end. So basically saying like there's just not enough smart women to be in STEM. And he got a lot of shit for this. And it seems like he was licking his wounds and talking to Epstein about it because in one of his random emails to Epstein, he says, quote, I observed that half of the IQ in the world was possessed by women without mentioning they are more than 51% of population. Now, there's a lot of grammar inconsistencies in these emails. It seems like a lot of people were saying, like, why are all of these people emailing each other so much? Why are there so many emails? And I guess you could say that, I don't know, they're boomers. It's like texting. I guess you could also say it's back in like 2011 and 16. I mean, I still think texting would be better, but it's just very odd. Maybe it's business people, so they're on email more than they are texting. I don't know the answer for it, but it is weird and it is something that a lot of people online are talking about. Now, it also seems like Epstein, for a lot of people, was like a safe person to talk about all of their worst beliefs in a way, because a lot of people email Jeffrey Epstein things and beliefs that they have. And then later they're like, oh my God, but like, don't tell anyone that I'm saying this, which I find really interesting. So, one of the emails that I'm going to reference between Larry Summers and Jeffrey Epstein is that there was this like whole fiasco that happened with Harvard where there was this woman named Michelle Jones. And I believe she was accepted into Harvard, but it was scandalous because she had spent like over 2 decades in prison for killing her 4-year-old son. What happened with that case? I don't know. I didn't look into it deeply. I can't speak on it, but that's what you need to know for the context of this email. Larry Summers ended up emailing Jeffrey Epstein and saying, I'm trying to figure out why American elite think if you murder your baby by beating and abandonment, it must be irrelevant to your admission to Harvard, but hit on a few women 10 years ago and you can't work at a network or think tank. Do not repeat this insight in all caps. Once again, fascinating to read because number one, I'm trying to figure out why American elite think this. American elite? American elite? Like you worked for Bill Clinton, you were the president of Harvard, and you're emailing with a billionaire who owns a pedophile island. Are you referring to yourselves, or is there another layer of elite that I don't know about? It's just like so crazy. Like, oh my God, like liberal people on Twitter and like MSNBC, like they're the elite, blah, blah, blah. Shut up. I'm so sick of these like billionaires and privileged people being like, there's like an elite class above us. No, there's not. You guys are at the top. Anyway, it's also wild that in here he's like, oh, hit on a few women 10 years ago and you can't do anything. They really hold your feet to the fire. I'm pretty sure people who can't work in a network or a think tank, it's just insane to me because, for example, like Matt Lauer, talk about somebody who was working at a network and then got fired for years of sexual misconduct. He would openly be groping women's asses on the show when they were sitting next to him. And he was still working for like 10 years before he got fired. It's just so funny. Like, it's not funny, actually. It's the worst thing in the world, but it's crazy to me that there are some people out there who are like, oh my God, like I groped women a few times and now I can't do anything. What world are we living in? Anyway, so back to the original quote from Larry Summers' representative, where he was like, oh, he deeply regrets being in contact with Jeffrey Epstein. I don't think he does, because the more you look at these emails, these two were friends. They would even talk about lady problems. So Larry Summers, he's been married to a woman named Alyssa New since 2005, and he would frequently email Jeffrey Epstein for advice with women. At one point, they're emailing about this woman that he ended up marrying, and Jeffrey Epstein responds saying, she's already beginning to sound needy with a smiley face. Nice. Oh. In November 2018, okay? Remember, Jeffrey Epstein was convicted for the second time in 2019. So this Larry Summers guy is emailing him all the way basically right up to when he's convicted. Larry Summers forwarded Epstein an email from a woman with this comment. Think no response for a while, probably appropriate. It's just so insane that like me sending a screenshot of like a guy I'm texting to my girlfriends and being like, how should I respond? Like, should I wait 4 hours to respond? He's doing the same thing, but he's a full ass man who used to be the president of Harvard. And he's asking Jeffrey Epstein for advice. Like, obviously, the two of them are close friends. That's not something that you do to like a business colleague or someone that you had dinner with once. It's just like insane to me. Then, even in March 2019, this is like a few months before he gets convicted. In this email exchange, Larry Summers is telling Epstein that he responded to the woman brushing him off by telling her, quote, awfully coy you are, and then saying, did you really rearrange the weekend we were going to be together because guy number 3 was coming? So, to make sense of this, it basically seems like he's trying to meet up with some girl. She's giving him the runaround and he's asking Epstein for advice. Larry says to Jeffrey, she must be very confused or maybe wants to cut me off, but she wants professional connection a lot, so holds to it. And in response, Jeffrey Epstein suggests that maybe this woman is making him, quote, pay for past errors, but no whining showed strength. So it's just insane that this guy, Larry Summers, is like, wow, I really regret keeping in contact with him. And it's like, you were asking him for dating advice basically on a monthly basis. You guys were really good friends. Although I will say, let's not be too hard on Larry Summers, just because when you really think of it, like, who among us hasn't reached out to a convicted pedophile to ask for advice on what to do with friendships and dating and romance and all of that stuff? I think we've all done that at some point. It's just so insane to me, and I feel like that level of thinking is kind of the only thing that we can do now because we're in such a world with the Epstein timeline where this is a slight aside. Megyn Kelly recently was on her show saying that, quote, Jeffrey was into the barely legal type. She said, like, he liked 15-year-old girls. I realize this is disgusting. I'm definitely not trying to make an excuse for this. I'm just giving you facts that he wasn't into like 8-year-olds, but he liked the very young teen types who could pass for even younger than they were, but would look legal to a passerby. What? I'm sorry, Megyn Kelly. Megyn Kelly, who has a 14-year-old daughter herself. How are you able to choke those words out? Like, what in the fuck? I feel like the only thing we can do is be like, absolutely, Megyn Kelly. Who among us hasn't slept with a 15-year-old? Oh, you haven't? Why haven't you? And then therein lies the fucking answer. Like, it just works me into such a rage. Like, she is getting a lot of shit online for saying this, but the fact that you would even think this is okay to say, like, we truly are in the era of trying to mess with the semantics of like, well, it wasn't an 8-year-old kid, it was a 15-year-old kid. Stop, full stop. Like maybe this is why people were able to see the northern lights all across the country the other week because the apocalypse is upon us. Like I just cannot believe that this is something that's entering the news cycle. Oh, anyway, the next person is a woman named Catherine Rummler, if that's how you pronounce it. She's a lawyer and she served as White House counsel during the presidency of Barack Obama. So this is also just something that I want to mention because some people are like, they're only talking about Republicans. And it's like, no, no, no. There's over 20,000 pages. Everybody's in here. The Democrats release some, the Republicans release some. Like a lot of people are in here. So Catherine, this lawyer in August 2018, she was emailing with Jeffrey Epstein and they were talking about hush money payments that were made by Trump to the adult film star Stormy Daniels before the 2016 election, an issue in which Trump was later convicted of falsifying business records. He, of course, has denied allegations that he had an affair with Stormy Daniels. And I actually spoke to Stormy Daniels myself 2 years ago at the AVN Awards in Las Vegas. And I interviewed her. It wasn't like 60 minute style, it was for TikTok videos. And yeah, she was talking about Trump. Absolutely. Of course she was. Now, in these email exchanges between Catherine and Jeffrey Epstein, at one point, Epstein writes, you see, I know how dirty Donald is. Mm. And even though she's also trying to distance herself from these emails, in a similar case to what happens with Larry Summers, we see another email example of her being like buddy buddy with Jeffrey Epstein because at one point she's emailing Jeffrey Epstein about this road trip that she's going on and she's going to be going through New Jersey to New York and it's like her road trip. And this is what she emails Jeffrey Epstein. Think I am going to drive. I will then stop to pee and get gas at a rest stop on the New Jersey Turnpike. We'll observe all the people there who are at least 100 pounds overweight. We'll have a mild panic attack as a result of the observation. And then we'll decide that I am not eating another bite of food for the rest of my life out of fear that I will end up like one of these people. And it's just like, this was in 2018. First of all, like, fat phobia aside, New Jersey, come on. I'm a Jersey girl. All of that like insanity aside, what are you doing writing short little like this was almost like a little blurb that I would write on Tumblr back in high school when I was like, think that I might go to blah 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 and get the ice cream. I ponder about the ice cream with blah blah blah. Why are you putting together like little short story snippets to Jeffrey Epstein in email? And this is another example of like, this isn't just business that you're doing with someone. You're being buds with him. You're putting together these like sonnets of emails that you're sending to him about these heinous things. And anyone who's like, oh my God, I deeply regret talking to him. Absolutely not. You weren't just talking to him for business or talking to him for investigative journalism. You were being buddies with the guy, which is really weird about all of this. Peter Thiel is the next person on the list. We did a great conspiracy episode all about Peter Thiel on Patreon, and my opinion, and my alleged opinion about how he killed his younger model boyfriend in Miami. Ooh, a lot of stuff around that. Weird conspiracies with Peter Thiel, him and JD Vance. Like, anyway, we have a whole episode on it. But we also have email correspondence between Peter Thiel and Jeffrey Epstein. On November 2018, they were emailing each other. Jeffrey Epstein asked Peter Thiel if he was enjoying LA. He also complimented Peter Thiel on his Trump exaggeration, comma, not lies. And Peter Thiel said, can't complain thus far, dot, dot, dot. And Epstein replied, December, or DEC, DEC, visit me in the Caribbean. Peter Thiel has talked on the Joe Rogan podcast in August of 2024 that he has met Jeffrey Epstein. He said, quote, I met Epstein a few times as well. And he said about this that he was introduced to Epstein by another Silicon Valley exec in 2014. He said on the Rogan show, I didn't check, didn't ask any questions about it. And he surmised that Epstein knew a lot about taxes. This is the thing that steams me. He's never referred to as a pedophile. He's always referred to, like literally put quotes around the phrase disgraced financier. I don't even know if that's how you say the word correctly. Financier, financier, whatever. Financer? Am I dumb? Is it financer? Anyway, the disgraced financer, I'm just going to call it. That is how they always describe Jeffrey Epstein. And it's like, are you kidding me? He's the most notorious for being a pedophile and being an agent with honeypot spies. And Peter Thiel is going on the Joe Rogan Experience and saying, yeah, Epstein knew a lot about taxes. That would be like if I met Beyonce and I was like, you know what's crazy about Beyonce? She knows a lot about mascara. What the fuck? Like, what about everything else that she's famous and known for? But instead, everybody wants to be like, yeah, Jeffrey Epstein, I met him once. It had a lot to do with taxes. But it wasn't just about taxes, was it? Because we have more emails between Epstein and Peter Thiel. This was in 2014. Jeffrey sends an email to Peter Thiel, and the subject is, that was fun, comma, see you in 3 weeks. So he's trying to tell the story on the Joe Rogan Experience that they met once at a dinner because somebody else introduced them, and he didn't check, he didn't ask any questions, he just knew a lot about taxes. But then we have all of these other emails, and it's like, well, they've talked about his place in the Caribbean. They've talked about his visit to LA. They did something that was fun, and then they had another something scheduled in 3 weeks. So, of course, lies, lies, lies. The next one, Noam Chomsky, we've talked about this before. He's often referred to as the father of modern linguistics, and it's really surprising, but he also had a lot of conversations with Jeffrey Epstein. It was academic, it was personal. Sometimes they would talk about Trump, including emails that were sent in December of 2016. There was one email where Noam Chomsky tells Epstein, I notice your prediction was right about Trump avoiding the White House as far too primitive. I don't know what that means, but it's just fucking weird that they were talking. Then Steve Bannon, the executive and the former White House chief strategist, he has also had emails with Jeffrey Epstein. In a 2018 exchange with Steve Bannon, Jeffrey Epstein said, quote, there are many leaders of countries we can organize for you to have one-on-ones. And this is when Steve Bannon and Jeffrey Epstein were talking about a trip that Steve Bannon was going to make to Europe for a bit. And Epstein, once again, was trying to do the whole spider web of connection things for Steve Bannon. Then Bannon replies and he basically says, yeah, I'll spend about 8 to 10 days in Europe. And Epstein says back to him, if you are going to play here, you'll have to spend time. Europe by remote doesn't work. And then he's basically making a case for like, you should stay in Europe for a little bit longer. But he also has the quote, if you are going to play here. Who says that? What two grown men talking about business say, well, if you're going to play here, you should make it a little bit longer. Lock him up. Lock him up. Not me. Going back to Trump from 2016. I'm like, based off of all of these emails, lock him up. Just instead of her, I'm saying him. We also find out in these emails that Jeffrey Epstein and Prince Andrew, of course, had a much longer relationship than Prince Andrew has said to the public. And in an email to somebody else, I forget the name of that guy. I talked about him earlier. He used to be a prince, but it's not Prince Andrew himself. But Jeffrey Epstein is emailing him, and he references the photo of Prince Andrew with Virginia Giuffre, the same photo that Prince Andrew has said on record it must have been a doctored photo. And now we have an email where Jeffrey Epstein says, quote, yes, she was on my plane, and yes, she had her photo taken with Andrew, as many of my employees have. We already knew that the photo is real and that Prince Andrew was lying like the asshole that he is. but now we just like double know. All right. Now I know that you guys want to hear about the Bill Clinton sucking of the dick thing. So let's talk about it. The very first time that we, or at least when I did, when I was doing my research, that we see Bill Clinton referenced in these new file drops is in emails between Jeffrey Epstein and the artist Andre Serrano, who is famous for something that's like so insane. He did this controversial photo in 1987 called Piss Christ, and it's showing a crucifix that's submerged in urine. And obviously, it got the people going because it was controversial and there was a lot of like widespread condemning of this photo. And that's who Jeffrey Epstein was emailing, the piss artist, Andre. So in October 2016, Epstein wrote to this artist that there was no good choice in the election. So keep in mind, this was the Trump versus Hillary Clinton election. And Andre replies by saying, I was prepared to vote against Trump for all the right reasons, but I'm so disgusted by the outrage over grab him by the pussy that I may give him my sympathy vote. So these were the types of people that Jeffrey Epstein was in contact with. Most people went, oh, maybe I'll vote for Trump. Ooh, he's bragging about sexually assaulting women. Maybe I won't. And then we have Piss Jesus Edgelord of the year going, I wasn't going to vote for Trump, but now that I found out that he's sexually assaulting women and bragging about it, and people are mad about that, I'm going to give him my sympathy vote. Awesome. Piss Lord Jesus is going to vote for Donald Trump. Anyway, then the artist continues in the email by saying, I'm sure Bill C said things too. So now we get a Bill Clinton reference. Bill C could be one way to reference and kind of nickname Bill Clinton. And another nickname that Bill Clinton has is Bubba. And he has gone by the nickname Bubba all the way back from 1992. Bubba equals Bill Clinton. One summary of this says, quote, his folksy manner led him to be nicknamed Bubba starting from the 1992 presidential election. So he's had this nickname for a while. So as people are going through these emails, a lot of people notice that there's an email that talks about Trump blowing Bubba. And this is an email from March 2018. And Jeffrey Epstein's brother, Mark, is emailing Jeffrey Epstein, and he's telling him to ask Steve Bannon. We know that he previously, right, he was the one who wanted to go play in Europe. He goes, can you ask Steve Bannon, Trump's former chief strategist, if Vladimir Putin, Russian president, has, quote, the photos of Trump blowing Bubba. And then he says, you and your boy Donnie can make a remake of the movie Get Hard. And then Epstein replies, and I thought I had Thesaurus, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. It's a Yiddish word for troubles. Oh, and I thought I had troubles. So let's just take that in, basically saying, ask Steve Bannon if Putin has the photos of Trump blowing Bubba. Now, Bubba would be Bill Clinton. What does this mean? Well, we have Mark, who's still alive, to tell us, because he recently spoke to The Advocate in a story that was published yesterday, Sunday, on November 16th, about that email. He said, quote, for the avoidance of doubt, the reference to Bubba in this correspondence is not in any way a reference to former President Bill Clinton. He said that Bubba is a private individual who is not a public figure. He also said that the email exchange was being misread. Quote, they were simply part, oh no, not the word simply. I was simply blocked for telling her to blah, blah, blah. Anyway, he says, they were simply part of a humorous private exchange between two brothers and were never meant for public release or to be interpreted as serious remarks. Now, number one, there's two things I want to say about this. Number one that I take away from this is that Mark Epstein isn't saying this is fake news. He isn't saying this is AI. He isn't saying I never sent that, it's photoshopped. He's just saying it wasn't part for public release. It was an email between two brothers. So we know that it's real now. The second thing is that he's not saying, oh my God, we were just joking around. Trump never blew anyone. He's just saying that Bubba isn't Bill Clinton. My mind's all over the place. He's saying that Bubba is a private individual who is not a public figure. I mean, tell me if I should interpret it differently, but that's just what I'm reading in between the lines, you know? Oh, no, it's not President Clinton. It's a private individual. Okay, so he sucked someone off. And then he's saying these emails like weren't meant to be released to the public. Okay, so it's a true email. So it's an email and you're talking about somebody sucking the other person off. Just to insert a little bit of levity in it, because these episodes are always like super dark. The things that people are joking about online when it comes to this, they're saying, number one, this gives a whole new meaning to the big, beautiful bill. Just how big, just how veiny. The second thing people are saying is perhaps that's why Trump was always talking about draining the swamp, and maybe a nickname for Bill Clinton is the swamp, and that's why Trump wanted to drain him. The next one is calling him Donica Lewinsky, which I don't really like as much because I don't want to make fun of Monica Lewinsky, but Donica Lewinsky, I could see it as a funny nickname. The second, or I guess third or fourth or something, is this idea that like him being obsessed with Hillary's emails and running against her, is that lover scorned behavior? Is that you trying to get Bill's attention because maybe the sloppy toppy wasn't that good? I think potentially flaunting his situationship so publicly with Elon Musk, trying to get Bill's attention. Ladies, we've all done something like that before. I think becoming president and moving into his house where he used to live. I've done drive-bys in high school, you kind of circle around where somebody lives. I haven't moved in myself, but maybe he was doing that to get his attention. I also think potentially all of the dances that he does where he's like fist pumping in the air, but with his hands like this. You probably can't see unless you're watching on YouTube, that open hold kind of Lego hand motion. Why are you jerking off the air? Trying to get his attention? But other questions that people are asking is what would the fallout be if there's a photo of Trump blowing Bill Clinton and we see it online? And we see it online tomorrow. Or maybe it's him blowing somebody else because Bubba could be a private individual, which I find so funny that he wasn't like, Trump didn't blow anyone. He's like, oh no, Bubba's a private individual. Okay. What would the fallout be if that photo came out online? And is this why AI has become so rampant? It's such a thing in our zeitgeist. AI has been around for a long time. There have been deep fakes of people being made for long, long times. But recently, everybody's talking about it and everybody knows what it is. Is there a reason why they're getting the public so familiar with this? Also, guess who's doing that? Donald Trump himself. For months now, he's been posting and reposting AI content of him, AI videos of him. Is he doing that to kind of already seed this future narrative of like, that's AI, there's so much AI of Donald Trump? Even famously, South Park, they're doing AI videos of Donald Trump. Is he going to now look at that and be like, I'm not even mad about it because now when the photos and videos of me come out, we'll just say that it's AI? And then I think what this makes me think of all of this is that when you read through a lot of these emails, I'm not including everything just because I don't want the episode to be like too annoying with all these different people's names and dates. And like, I want it to be not fun, but like at least digestible. But when you read through all of these different emails, Jeffrey Epstein is connected with different people who mostly work in politics, and he is connecting them to other people. So he's in this sphere. There was even emails where he's casually briefing Russian diplomats on the psychology of the US president. I'm going to mispronounce all of these names, but the Russian diplomat that he was briefing is Vitaly Churkin, and he was briefing him on like the psychology of the president. He was telling, once again, I'm going to mispronounce this, Thorbjorn Jagland to let Putin know that Lavrov can get an insight from him. So this is Epstein emailing with Russian politicians basically saying, hey, let Putin know, like, I can give insight on this. I know that. I know this. That's not what a random rich person does. No, that's what a government asset does. That's someone who deals in information and blackmail and espionage. That's what someone does. So yes, the pedophilia is a huge fucking part of this. It's nasty. It's disgusting. It's a behemoth. But also the government asset and the agents and the blackmail, that's also another huge behemoth of what's going on. So when you look through all of these emails, it's like, yeah, all of these people are fucked. It's like, fuck how they're talking about playing in Europe, how they're giving advice about women, how they're trying to be buddy-buddy with Jeffrey Epstein. But it's also insane because he's so involved with all of these politicians and why and who. So we did the episode about honeypot spies and Jeffrey Epstein and how I believe he was running like I don't even want to say honeypot because this is with children, but he was running a type of honeypot espionage activity. Now, a question that we need to think about is what came first, the chicken or the egg? I'm just going to say CIA and Mossad, did they go to Epstein and they say, we want you to start a honeypot operation, and here's how you're going to do it. And we're going to build it with you from the ground up and blah, blah, blah. Or was Jeffrey Epstein on his own doing something like this? And then a government agency came in and said, I see what you're doing, and we're going to take it over from here. And we're going to give you resources, and you're going to tell us intel, almost like when the most pop culture example I can think of is how Call Her Daddy started on their own with 4 episodes, and then Dave Portnoy came in with Barstool Sports, and they were like, ooh, we'll take it from here. You're now going to be a part of Barstool Sports. We'll fund you, put our branding on everything that you do, blah, blah, blah. Probably not the best example. That is just the one that came to me off the top of my head. Part of me wonders, was Jeffrey Epstein doing all of this nasty shit on his own? And then let's say hypothetically, I'm just going to throw it out there, he gets convicted in 2008 in Florida for having this basically like pyramid scheme, multi-level marketing, pedophilia going on. But then he gets that sweetheart deal from Alexander Acosta, and he says we have the proof of Alexander Acosta saying that he was an asset, not to touch it, to leave it alone, that it was above his pay grade, that Jeffrey belonged to intelligence. So what if Jeffrey Epstein was doing all of this honeypot shit on his own? He gets caught red-handed in 2008, and they go, we'll give you a sweetheart deal because the deal was unbelievable. You'll be guilty, but now in the future, you're going to work for us. I don't know who us is, right? But you're going to work for us, and you're going to keep doing what you're doing because you already have the contacts and the blackmail on people, and we're going to give you the funds and the protection to go even bigger with it. So maybe that happened. Without a doubt, I fully 100% believe Jeffrey Epstein was absolutely a government asset. And then you have to think, which government or governments? And then you have to think, if we have all of these email correspondence and people are close with Jeffrey Epstein, and we know that presidents, politicians, judges, news people, business people are all being blackmailed to act in a certain way, say things a certain way, do things a certain way, then our entire government is a facade. It's not a democracy. We don't control anything. It's some government agency or country or one person with all of the hard drives that's pulling all of the strings and making all of this happen, which is really spooky and really demoralizing. So thankfully, somebody on Reddit put together an action plan. They went, what do we do? Our country is not our country. Apparently, everybody's being blackmailed, and there's nothing holy or sacred in the world going on. Here's the action plan. Somebody said, number 1, support the independent diggers. We need to bypass the corporate media. We absolutely do. Like literally, CNN fucked, ABC fucked. I need to look into more, but everybody's in somebody's pocket. You can only trust Fluently Forward. No, it's just crazy the more you look into things. Like everybody owns somebody else. So they say, we need to bypass the corporate media. I'm talking about supporting journalists, independent journalists, and the folks at The Intercept who actually understand the intelligence angle. I don't know what The Intercept is. I can't speak to this. I don't know if this is a good news source or not. He was also saying, the FOIA flood, the Freedom of Information Act. We can file these act requests regarding the State Department's knowledge of Epstein's diplomatic meetings. Even the rejection letters will prove a point if they cite national security. Also, the town hall grenade. I think we need to start showing up at town halls. We need to ask our representatives to their faces if they support subpoenaing the unredacted Epstein files as a matter of national counterintelligence. Force them to answer why they aren't worried about their colleagues being compromised by foreign powers. And then another thing that I want to add onto this plan that I was looking into myself, during Trump's first administration, they stopped doing this thing that Obama had done. They basically reversed this policy from the Obama era where they would release publicly visitor and call logs. And in the first administration for Trump, they would keep note of all of these things, but they wouldn't release it publicly. However, all of these logs of visits and calls to the White House, to Donald Trump for his first administration, they are subject to something called the Presidential Records Act, which means that they would be released to the National Archives 5 years after the president left office. Donald Trump's first term ended January 20th, 2021. 5 years later, it's coming up. It's basically 2 months from now. January 20th, 2026, we will be able to request through the Presidential Records Act all of these logs of who was visiting the White House and calling the White House, which is interesting because as we continue on with this cursed episode, it does seem like Jeffrey Epstein and Donald Trump were in contact after he became president, most notably 2017. So, one of the things that I then started thinking about with all of this information is I was like, I kind of want to go back in time. And now, did Epstein die? What if he's alive today? What if he didn't die? We know something weird happened around his hanging himself in his jail cell, even though both of the guards were asleep at the same time and the cameras didn't work at the same time and they didn't do their rounds. And then also, when they took his body out with the body bag, they unzipped it to show part of his face, but the ears didn't match. Don't even get me started. Anyway, there's been so much suspicious stuff around that. And some people were saying maybe he's still alive or if he was killed, because we all know he didn't hang himself. Did somebody put out a hit on him? Was it Trump? When you look through a lot of these different emails, we got a lot of different references to how Epstein could be the one to take Trump down. From Landon Thomas Jr. in 2016, he sends an email to Jeffrey Epstein with the subject matter Trump, and he says, "It's getting scary. The stories you could tell, dot, dot, dot." Michael Wolff to Jeffrey Epstein, February 2016, he goes, "Yeah, you're the Trump bullet." There was a lot of talk around this time that the one person who could stop this Trump presidency and bring it all down was Jeffrey Epstein. So, isn't it interesting that while Trump is president, Jeffrey Epstein gets convicted? He goes to jail. He dies in his jail cell in 2019 underneath Trump's presidency. Did he make the hit? It just makes you look at it from a little bit of a different angle. And one of the other key pieces of information that we get in these new emails is that there's a chance that Jeffrey Epstein and Donald Trump spent Thanksgiving together in 2017. So this is when he's emailing with this Manhattan modeling management guru named Faith Cates, and she's asking him, "Where are you spending Thanksgiving?" And he replies, "Eva," or Ava, EVA, which is likely a reference to his former girlfriend, Ava Anderson, Dubin, who would later testify at Ghislaine Maxwell's sex trafficking trial in 2021. So then she mentions to Epstein, "Oh, who else is down there?" And Epstein replies by naming Trump, the hedge fund founder David Fizzle, and then someone who he referred to as Hansen. We know that it's certainly not Chris Hansen. But he replies with those three people to the question, who else is down there? These are three people down here spending Thanksgiving with me. Now, according to White House records, Trump spent the Thanksgiving of 2017, his first Thanksgiving as president, at his Mar-a-Lago resort in Palm Beach, and they did not disclose the guest list. So there could be a chance that Trump and Epstein were having Thanksgiving together in 2017 after he became president. So with all of this, knowing that they have such a deep friendship over the years, they've traveled together, they've dined together, all of this stuff happened. He was kicked out of Mar-a-Lago, but then they also might have done Thanksgiving together in 2017, which is fucking wild. Was Trump the one to have Jeffrey Epstein killed or let out of there without a scratch on him? All I know is that when you look at everybody who's related to the Jeffrey Epstein case, look at everyone who's died by quote unquote suicide. Jeffrey Epstein, he died in his jail cell. Jean-Luc Brunel, he was this French modeling guy who worked with Jeffrey Epstein, also an abuser. Guess what? He died by suicide in his cell as well. Virginia Giuffre, one of the most prominent victims and accusers, could you believe it? She died by suicide. Thomas Bowers, who worked at the Deutsche Bank, he was an executive. He handled some of Epstein's accounts, and then he also signed off on some of their unorthodox loans to Donald Trump. Oh my God, it's so crazy. He died by suicide. Caroline Adriano, she is a survivor who testified against Ghislaine Maxwell at her trial. And guess what? She died later from an accidental drug overdose. Lee Skye Patrick is another Epstein victim and survivor, died from an accidental drug overdose. There's an investigative journalist and celebrity biographer, Wendy Lee, and her body was found under her London balcony in May 2016. And reports say that it was a suicide, even though people in her life have said that she had an optimistic view on life and they don't believe it was a suicide. Movie producer Steve Bing, after he talked to the FBI about Epstein, guess what? He died by suicide by jumping from the 27th floor of his LA apartment building. Mark Middleton, who was an advisor to former President Bill Clinton and had ties to Jeffrey Epstein, his is the most wild, quote unquote, suicide of all time. He drove to the middle of a ranch. Ugh, it's like so crazy. And basically, his suicide attempt was standing on a bench, tying an electrical cord around his neck and then to a tree, and then shooting himself in the chest. So it was both hanging, but then also shooting. And in the first report, when they came to the crime scene, they said that there was no weapon found on the premises. But then in the second report, when they looked at it again, they went, wait a minute, there is a shotgun and it was 30 feet away from him. So how does that happen? You hold up a shotgun to, shoot yourself in the chest. And then after you do that, somehow, whoosh, you wake up and you throw it away 30 feet away from you. It's just like there are so many suicides or strange things going on with all of these cases. And like, you just can't look me in the eyes and say, my God, it's crazy. No, all those people died by suicide related to the Epstein thing. Yep, pretty crazy. I know that hits are being taken out on people. I know that they're being taken out on people. It's just wild to me. Oh, also, I have a note in here that this was like one other miscellaneous thing that I just want to mention that was like really fucking weird. There was this video of a tiny dog biting a doll, like a stuffed animal doll of Donald Trump. And next to that stuffed animal of Donald Trump, there was a stuffed animal of Hillary Clinton. And it's like 19 seconds of this dog like biting the Trump dog. And I guess they sent that to each other over email. I don't know. It's just like weird shit. Weird shit. So that's a little bit. That's just like skimming off of the top what I've done in the last 24 hours looking at all of this stuff. And I do want to say too, I just want to add a note of caution for people who are diving into this Epstein thing, just because I see a lot of people who are like new to the conspiracy world dipping their toes in. And as someone who's been here far too long, I do want to warn people of a few things. Number one, especially when talking about Jeffrey Epstein, I'm seeing so much anti Semitism mostly fueled by Candace Owens. And then also a lot of people like the phrase like Kanye was right. Kanye was right about everything going around on TikTok. And it pisses me off so much. If you start diving into conspiracy theories, you'll notice that a lot of people almost have like a get rich quick scheme when it comes to conspiracy theories. And they want to tell you that all of the problems in the world have one villain, person, place, or thing that's responsible for all of it. And it's like, wouldn't it be so nice if that existed, but it doesn't. It doesn't exist for anything. And I know because I do it for myself. I go, maybe if I cut out gluten, then I will stop being bloated and my mental health will be better. And then also I won't have dry skin. And it's like, girl, no, like you have to do a variety of things. You can't just do one thing. It's a tantalizing idea. Doesn't exist. But a lot of people now are looking at everything. And I know I'm going to sound like a hypocrite because I'm out here being like, Jeffrey Epstein was absolutely working for Mossad. We did like a whole Mossad episode over on Patreon. And while I think that Mossad, aka Israel, is included in a part of this whole Epstein fiasco, if you start looking into conspiracy theories online and you don't keep your wits about you, you will run into the messaging of like Jews control everything. And that's what it's always been about. And once again, I do think that Mossad and the CIA are all parts in some of this. I mean, countries manipulating other countries, the entire industry of espionage has been around ever since countries were created and like lines were first drawn. But anytime you're diving into a conspiracy theory and you start to see these sentences of like, here's the answer, here's the one thing that's responsible for it, and it all trickles down from this one thing, stop yourself right there because it's probably not correct. And to that end, I am once again going to reference what I mentioned up at the top, which is like, yes, we have these emails from Epstein. Holy shit, we have a treasure trove of all of this information. Jeffrey Epstein was also a liar who only wanted to protect his own ass. So even when we're reading what Jeffrey Epstein is saying, and I want to believe that Donald Trump sucked off Bubba, but you have to look at that as well and be like, I don't know, it's two brothers joking. They also made a bunch of fun of Trump. They have like a video of a dog eating Trump's nuts as a stuffed cartoon animal. So all of this to say, like, everything with Epstein is becoming so top of mind. This is what I wish I could have said about the Gaylor theories too. Let's just keep our feet on the ground, because even with new information coming out, it's like, but can we trust who said it or why he was saying it to somebody? Even Michael Wolff, I'm like, what a shitty guy to be corresponding with Epstein. But then you have to think maybe he wanted to be his buddy, so then that way he would go on record and take down Donald Trump. Who knows how all of this is working? We don't know. But I think each week or month, maybe we get a little bit closer. And I hope we do. So thank you guys for hanging out with me for what is this, like the 90th episode that we've done on Jeffrey Epstein? Anyway, thank you guys for hanging out with me. Tough episode, but interesting stuff that's coming out. We also did kind of an episode in a similar vein over on Patreon. We talked about the Neuralink conspiracy theories. Very interesting stuff. We talked about Erica Kirk conspiracy theories and a little bit of a deep dive on her. We talked about Sydney Sweeney's GQ article. And then we also talked about different celebrities speaking out and not speaking out about Trump using their music and what we think about that. So a trending topic with a conspiracy kind of edge over on Patreon. If you want to check that out, patreon.com/fluentlyforward. And for everybody else, thank you for hanging out with me, and I will see you next week for another episode of Fluently Forward. Bye, guys.